Have you ever wondered what made Jesus such an amazing communicator, such a transformational communicator? What is it about his words that not only captured attention, but shifted beliefs, inspired people to take action, and created a whole new way of living? Well, today we're going to dive into Matthew chapter 5, verses 1 to 16, and take a look at how Jesus spoke so that you, as an emerging or experienced speaker, can learn from the way Jesus spoke and apply these same techniques to your speaking so that you can uplevel your skills and become not just a speaker who gives information, but one who evokes transformation. Hi, I'm Lisa Vanderkwaak, and I'm your host today on Speak to Transform. And we're on a journey of looking at how Jesus spoke so that we can glean from that. I don't know about you, but I am always fascinated when I look in the scriptures and see the way that Jesus captured attention, the way that he got to the heart of his listeners and helped them to really come to a decision by the way that he communicated. And yes, you might say, well, he was God, but I want you to remember he was a human on the earth. He was a man, and he was modeling the way that we were to show up and give of all that God had given us to be able to fulfill the mission that God had given him. He led the way and he became an example for us to follow. So that's my goal here and I'm just taking you along on the journey of what it looks like to speak like Jesus. I don't have it all figured out, but I am learning along the way and really gleaning from everything I see in scripture. So I'm so glad that you can join me on this journey. Let me know in the comments where you are joining me from, wherever you're watching this video. But let's start with Matthew chapter 5, verses 1 to 16. Now, I'll just remind you that we're not going to go into theological discussions about the text and things like that. We're going to leave that to a theologian. Even though I am trained, I have a Christian education in terms of sermon prep and all those things. I am not a theologian, and this is not my purpose today. My purpose in this series is to glean from the speaking style and approach and techniques that Jesus used to see if there's something that we could use today to become transformational communicators on the earth and continue to advance the kingdom wherever God has us. So let's take a look at Matthew 5, verses 1 to 16. Now, this passage is traditionally known as the Sermon on the Mount. And we're going to look at it to uncover some practical speaking techniques Jesus used. And I want you to think about how you can apply these to your current way of communicating, your current way of speaking, and so that you can become like Jesus, speak like Jesus, and become a transformational communicator. You know, time is valuable. I don't want to just waste people's time, and I don't want them to feel like their time is being wasted listening to me as a speaker. I want it to count. So let's just set the scene here. Jesus comes upon this area and he notices that there's a vast crowd, there's a huge crowd gathering to hear him speak. Now, he had just started speaking in the chapter before, and there were crowds starting to follow him. And he saw this vast, the scripture says it's a vast crowd of people started to gather and wanting to hear him speak. Now, he didn't just stay in the crowd and began to shout in the crowd from the ground. What did he do? Well, he moves to a hillside that's nearby. He moves to the slope of a hillside and sits down. Now, why would he do that? It might seem common sense, but I want to point it out because it's really important for you to understand in terms of a speaker. He went up on the hillside, on the slope of the hill, because visibility and audibility matter. Being seen and heard matter. He positioned himself on a higher ground, and in doing so, he could see the crowd, but they could see him. He ensured that they could both see him and hear him. and the sound traveled out over the valley. These are key influences if you want to be, sorry, these are key elements, I should say. These are key elements for you as a speaker if you want to influence and impact your listeners. You need to be seen and heard. All right? It's not enough. It's not enough just to sit in a corner. You have to be seen and heard. As a kingdom speaker or an entrepreneur, you may be hesitant. So many entrepreneurs I meet, so many kingdom entrepreneurs, kingdom speakers, emerging speakers even struggle with this whole area, and they're hesitant to be seen. They're hesitant to get themselves visible. You might be the same. Maybe you feel uncomfortable putting yourself out there. But here's the truth. Impact requires influence, and influence requires being seen and heard. And Jesus modeled this for you and I. So if you want to create a bigger impact, you must move from hiding to the hilltop, from hesitant to being heard. Visibility is not an option if you want to share the message that God has placed on your heart. If you want to offer your unique contribution to the world, you need to be seen and heard. So here's the speaking technique number one that I want you to see here. As we continue on, one is you need to be seen and you need to be heard. Sounds common sense, but many speakers struggle. They come to me and say, Lisa, I want to get speaking gigs. I want this. And I'm like, well, what are you doing to be seen and heard? Do people even know what you speak on? That's the first step. Next one, we're going to talk about going into the next section of this passage in chapter 5, verses 1 to 16. Jesus, as he sat down, he began to teach. And immediately we see one of the most powerful speaking techniques in action. And this is going to be your speaking technique number 2. Okay. So instead of Jesus giving a long list of to-dos and not to-dos, Jesus actually painted a vivid picture of what was possible. What was the result or reward that the listeners could experience if they applied his principles, if they put something into action, if they took a certain action. For example, in the Sermon of the Mount, in some translations, it says, blessed is he who, or in the Passion Translation in verse 3, it says, what happiness comes to you when you feel your spiritual need. What happiness comes to you when you feel your spiritual need. For yours is the heaven's kingdom. Verse 4, it says, what delight will come to you when you wait upon the Lord. Verse 5, what blessing will come to you when gentleness lives in you. Now, each of these statements, if you go and look at them, they follow a pattern. And the pattern is this. The result or the reward comes first. So, for example, the result or the reward was happiness, delight, blessing, enrichment, and so on. The action came second. Humility, waiting on the Lord, gentleness. So I want you to write this down. And this is the technique. Don't sell a process, sell the result. Don't sell a program, sell the transformation. As a speaker, your listeners, your audience are not going to buy your steps or processes. They're not interested in that. They buy the outcome. They're not as interested in the how until they believe the why and the what's in it for me. And this is exactly what Jesus did here. He told them, what's in it for you? Here's what's in it for you. If you choose to take this action, this is what's in it for you. But he didn't tell the action till after. He gave the result or the transformation or the reward first. He described the blessings they would receive and experience if they lived according to his teachings. And this is a powerful principle for you as a speaker as well. What this does is it creates what's possible. Now, in this, there is a formula called the EDGE formula that I learned as a speaking coach when I was in training to become a certified speaking coach 17 years ago. And I learned this formula called the EDGE formula. And actually, it is a very powerful sales formula. Now, if you don't like selling, then I want you to know that you shouldn't be speaking. In fact, there's no industry on the earth that selling is not a valuable skill for. No matter what you do in life, you are selling. Even if you are a minister, if you're in leadership in any way, or if you are teaching someone about something, you are selling them on the reason why they want to learn it, why they want to listen up, why they want to make some change. Selling is a word that just describes a way of persuading someone why, what's in it for them, and why they should do something. So if you think about that way, selling is actually service. And we're going to get into this as we go along here. But the second technique that you'll notice here in this passage that Jesus uses, as he continues on, he begins to teach and he uses analogies and metaphors. Why? Because instead of just making a point and telling people what to do, this technique helps to deepen someone's understanding and makes them reflect upon their own life. So he created moments of reflection. Without reflection, there can be no connection. So, as a speaker, you want to create opportunities when you're speaking for your listener to reflect. And let me know if you do this. For example, Jesus started to say in verse 13, "You are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world." In verse 14. Now, interesting, salt and light were common everyday elements in the lives of his listeners, right? So, what does an analogy do? An analogy helps compare something that is familiar to something that's unfamiliar, and it bridges the gap to understanding. So, by comparing their influence, the potential influence that they could have, he compared that to this familiar item of salt and light, the use of salt and light. And Jesus made this abstract concept of kingdom living concrete and memorable. He brought it home, he drove it home. And here's why this works. For example, analogies and metaphors they simplify complex ideas. They connect the unfamiliar to the familiar. As a speaker, you can use this technique all day long to help your audience grasp new concepts by anchoring them in everyday life. We have in speaking, one of the things that I teach my clients and speakers that come to me, and I coach them to become more dynamic, more high impact in their speaking, using anchors. We call them anchors. And what it does is something that holds a point in place that's tied to a point. So when they remember the anchor, they're going to remember the point. And it's a technique to help people to remember what you say long after you finish speaking. And this is really powerful because then your impact upon that person or that audience is farther reaching. It's way beyond the stage. So anchoring the point to something in everyday life. For example, instead of saying, "You need to build your visibility as a speaker," you could say, "You're like a lighthouse. If your light is hidden, those who are searching for direction in the storm, looking for a place to come home and hope, they won't know where to turn. Your light must shine brightly so others can see and find their way to hope and transformation." So that is a way that you can use analogies or metaphors. They make your message stick. Really important. Powerful technique that Jesus uses a lot. And within that, you can use it as well within your speaking. All right, so let's continue on here. Another great technique that Jesus uses is called contrast for clarity. He uses contrast several times in the scriptures. so many times. So we're just looking at one passage here in Matthew, and as we know, in Mark, Luke, and John, sometimes there's repeated instances of the same experience or same situation, and there's different elements that are brought out, but you'll see the same thing here. He uses contrast to deepen someone's learning and to bridge the gap. So again, in verse 14, he says, a city on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on a stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. So by contrasting a hidden light with light on a stand, Jesus emphasized the importance of living visibly and boldly for God, being seen, the importance and the absolute non-negotiable of you being visible and seen. It's not an option if you want to have impact and influence. And so contrast is a powerful way to highlight what's at stake. What's it going to cost you if you are not visible? What's it going to cost the people who are looking for that light and it's nowhere to be found, who are waiting for the direction and no one is telling them, no one is inviting them? What's it going to cost them? You see, you have a unique contribution to give to the world, and only you can give it. Your voice is meant to transform lives. And if you don't let it be heard and let yourself be seen and visible, you may be robbing someone of a transformation. Now, that's not to put it heavy on you. That's a reality. That's the responsibility we bear. Just like a light is not meant to be hidden, it's meant to be out in the open so that those who see it can be drawn to it and benefit from it. So it is with you. So if you stay hidden, the people that you are called to serve may never find the hope that they need. But if you step up and shine, you become a beacon of hope that draws others to their transformation, that opens up new possibilities that they'd never seen before. So as a speaker, you have that awesome privilege and responsibility to do that for your audience as well. Use contrast to show the difference between staying where they're at and being somewhere else where they want to be, or staying stuck and taking action. You can help them to see the difference and the cost by using contrast. All right, so let's go on to the fifth speaking technique. There's a lot in this passage, but I want you to unpack it. And we're going to see these same techniques throughout different passages as we continue on in this series. The next technique is Jesus uses persuasive language to speak to the heart. Now, I talked about this a bit because often as speakers, many speakers shy away from what we call selling. But they don't understand, and you may not understand, that actually selling is an act of love. When you help someone get something that they need to make their life better, it's actually serving. It's serving the people in your world by giving them what they need. And persuasive language is a form of selling that is used in every industry. Jesus used it here. So in verses 3 to 12, Jesus uses emotionally compelling language to connect with the hearts of his listeners. Look at how he frames each statement. He says, "What happiness comes to you?" And this is what I referred to earlier when I talked about the EDGE formula. He's tapping into emotional triggers, emotional motivations people have. For example, some people are motivated by what they can enjoy. If they do something, the outcome is I'm going to enjoy more time with my family, or I'm going to gain more income, or I'm going to gain more credentials, or I'm going to do more in less time. Or the other one is I'm going to be esteemed by all my colleagues. These are motivations that help people to see the value of taking action. And so Jesus actually taps into all four of these motivations that I call the EDGE formula. I don't call it, but I use it. It's called the EDGE formula that was taught to me by one of my mentors that trained me as a certified speaking coach. And it's called the EDGE formula: enjoy, do, gain, and esteem. So it is emotional language that is used to help people to see what's in it for them. So, for example, what happiness comes to you? Or blessed are you, in another translation says. He also says, what delight will come to you when? What bliss you will experience? How joyful you are? How others will see you as, or you'll be seen as, or known as. This type of language inspires and motivates because it appeals to the audience's desires and their emotions. It goes beyond the intellect and to the place of desire and knowing. And you want to create that desire. As a speaker, your job is not just to inform, but it's to inspire, evoke transformation, and create desire. So, using emotionally resonant language to connect with your audience paints a picture of what's possible for them when they take action on your message. And isn't that what you want? Don't you want them to be different after they hear you speak? And sometimes that difference comes only when they take action. All right, so the final speaking tip here that I want to, speaking technique that I want to lay out here in this short passage is that Jesus gave a call to action with confidence. He ends this Sermon on the Mount with a call to action. In verse 16, it says, let your light shine before others that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. So he doesn't just inspire them. He doesn't just say, oh, make them feel good in the motion. No, in the moment. No. He invites them to take action. I'm going to say that again. He doesn't just inspire them. He invites them to take action. And as a speaker, remember this. Information alone does not lead to transformation. Invitation does. Every great talk includes a call to action that invites your audience to take that next step that's right for them. If they want the transformation, or they want to go deeper, they want to pursue fulfilling their calling, whatever it is. So today, now that you've learned how Jesus spoke to transform lives, here's how you can apply these techniques to sharpen your speaking skills. First of all, position yourself for visibility. Move from hesitant to being heard by embracing the hilltop and becoming visible. When speaking, sell the result, not the process. Focus on the transformation that your audience will experience and not the steps that they need to take. Create a picture of what's possible. Use analogies and metaphors to drive home a point, to anchor your message in concepts that your audience can relate to, that are familiar to. Speak to the heart. Don't just speak to the head. Use emotionally compelling language to connect and inspire and create desire. And then finally, end with a call to action. Don't just share the information, invite transformation. Now, if you want to go deeper in these concepts of the use of emotionally compelling language that speaks to the heart, I have a free resource called 7 Words that Successful Speakers Use to Generate More Income and Impact. And it helps you to sell without sounding salesy, but in a very seamless way. So if you want to go deeper in learning these concepts and seeing how they can apply to your speaking effectiveness, I've created this free resource for you. And if you want it, just put the number 7 down below this video, or send me a message and with the word 7 as well, and I will give you access to that resource so that you can begin to implement it and apply it. So just as Jesus moved to the hilltop to be visible and spoke words that transformed lives, you are called to do the same. Your voice is meant to shine like a light on a hill, drawing others to you. to bring healing and hope and transformation. So my exhortation for you today, my invitation is today, step out of hiding, speak with boldness, let God use your voice to transform lives. The world is waiting for your light. And it's waiting for your light. It's your job to let it be seen and shine.